This is the month for out-of-nowhere shmups, it seems. We've already taken a look at an exceptional one with Drainus in our last video, but yet more are dropping without warning. While some of these are firmly in the ignore pile, others have piqued our interest, chief of which is a heavily Game Boy-inspired shooter with a lot of visual charm. In this episode of Bullet Heaven, we're taking a look at Pigship and the Giant Wolf from Pixelbone Studio. Pigship and the Giant Wolf is a traditional Yoko widescreen shoot-'em-up developed by Pixelbone Studio and published by Super Power-Up Games. It saw release on May 20th, 2022 on the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 5. No PlayStation 4 version, which seems kinda dumb given PS4 compatibility, but fine, we suppose. It has some great style, sure, but is there anything significant under its retro flash? Let's take a closer look. On a basic level, Pigship and the Giant Wolf functions. Players have access to 8-way digital-only movement controls, whether using a D-pad or an analog stick, and a handful of functions mapped into a rigid setup that can't be changed. Players fire their main weapons with the B button and can cycle forward and backward through a selection of 3 types of shots using the R and L buttons. Each fire type has varying power depending on the one chosen, with the primary single shot featuring the most chutzpah when impacting any given foe. The other 2 are almost useless for a frontal assault on larger enemies. At least at first. But not only is this fire slow speed, and not only is it not rapid, but it's also capped with a very slow fire rate. Using a controller with a turbo function helps maintain at least somewhat of a satisfying fire rate while mitigating repetitive strain on my aging joints, but it's still frustrating. Players can upgrade their shot power by collecting stars left behind from clearing certain enemy formations, but there's no indication of how high the player's power actually is. The only way players are really going to be able to tell is how larger enemies will be destroyed with slightly fewer shots. Oh, and if the player loses a life, these upgrades are lost. The game does require players to use certain types of fire to progress though, so getting used to how each behaves, and switching to them when needed, is important to making fundamental progress throughout the game. In addition to the player's shots though, a somewhat powerful multi-spread shot style bomber attack can be deployed with the A button for a decent amount of crowd control. These bombers can be replenished with B items collected from certain enemies, and bombers are often found near a spot where they'll be helpful. However, they're not a screen clearer, and not only will enemy shots be left behind, they'll still damage the player, while impacts with enemies will outright kill them. Worse still, many enemy shots are identical to the player's bombers, which can make for an easy death on account of not being able to parse what is what. Frankly, it's bullshit. Speaking of which, in normal mode, players can get hit with up to 3 bullets before being destroyed, but with no life gauge, it's up to the player to determine how much life they have left based on the damage visible on their ship. There's also a 3 Little Pigs upgrade system under the hood as well, which allegedly requires collection of a bunch of stars. We also noticed a bump in health after this happened. Neat, but obtuse. And again, collision with a ground hazard or enemy is instant death. The Pigship's gigantic hitbox doesn't help. It somehow gets worse since the player's invincibility frames are also very brief, making for situations where players will sustain multiple hits very quickly without much time to react. Players do have access to shields obtained through S items though, which grant a brief period of invincibility for the game's toughest parts. But of course, there's a catch. The shield only protects from shots, not enemies or obstacles. So insta-kills can still happen if players hit an obstacle or an enemy. Perhaps more so than the obtuse upgrade system, slow fire, weak shot variants, and irritating enemy behavior, though dying is easily the worst part about the game, as losing a life doesn't just throw players back to a checkpoint. No, that'd be too easy, wouldn't it? No, they're thrown to the beginning of the friggin' stage. Every time, regardless of where they are in the stage end boss or not. To that end, continuing after dying in stage 1 is completely pointless. Why not just start fresh with all of your lives at that point? Some stages, mercifully, do have warp points, but they must be flown through at, you guessed it, stage start. Which, okay, fine, good, but like, the 3rd stage, for example, is twice the length of the previous 2 stages. The worst offender, though? Because of course it gets worse. That has to be the inertia built into the controls. Movement takes a bit of time to get to speed and, subsequently, back to rest when the input is released. And it's simply heartbreaking too, because we finally get a game with as close to lag-free control as we could possibly have on the Switch, and what happens? It gets wrecked and ruined by friggin' inertia? Fuck's sake. Look, there are a lot of decisions made and features implemented that are just baffling for a game made in 2022, and as much as we want to like it, Pigship and the Giant Wolf is such a complete dud in the gameplay department. Just such a dud. Like, no sizzle. All fizzle. It features 6 stages that emphasize memorization a la R-Type, but they're actually not especially long. You'd never know it though, since they're just completely loaded with all kinds of cheap bullshit traps and questionable encounters that make stage restarts so frequent we wonder if they did it purposefully to artificially inflate the player's time with the game. That's not how that works. It's just not fun. And you know, I really would have liked to get footage for the whole game, but it locked up at the end of stage 5. What the come on, man. To be perfectly honest, we just don't see ourselves playing it much after this feature. For those that do enjoy this kind of gameplay though, there's the Bones mode that reduces the amount of hits the player can sustain and limits continues to 2 from infinite. Oh joy. For what it's worth though, this mode does have an online ranking system. So what's up with Pigship's score? Fuck. Pigship features a very basic scoring system. Collecting items and stars will boost the player's score slightly above and beyond the normal points obtained from enemy kills. Stage End makes things a little more interesting by factoring in the player's accuracy into the mix. Oh wait, no, I meant that's dreadful thanks to the player's super weak fire and erratic enemy behavior. Seriously, when the slippery inertia and slow fire rate is factored into the control, shooting for accuracy is probably less fun than burning your fingertips with a lighter. There's also a no item bonus that we never got for points as well, so I don't know. In general, the scoring and ranking are about as engaging as the main game. But again, for those that stick with this game, there is an online ranking system in the Bones mode. But like, this is a pretty sorry state of affairs. Pigship and the Giant Wolf isn't a particularly fun game, but what about its presentation? Well, that's an area where we enjoyed it quite a bit. The plot is as one might expect, with the 3 little pigs being accosted by a giant wolf. With his 2 brothers taken hostage, the final remaining piglet sets off to take care of business. The visuals are very reminiscent of the original Game Boy, though maybe not in the same way as the Pixel Game Maker Game Buddy line, which is also on the Switch eShop. For one, it plays in a 16:9 aspect ratio. For another, the game often shifts to other color palettes, sometimes featuring bloom effects. It's neat though, we'll give it that. The overall stage design may not be great, but the set pieces and special effects are actually pretty cool, so on that front we can't complain much. The general enemy design is also high on our likes with regards to this title, so gold star there. On the sound front though, there isn't as much consistency. The music, for example, is generally pretty great, though it does change between typical Game Boy PGM style and a more NES style sound font complete with PCM sampling, just like the NES had. We have to say, side by side, we definitely prefer the NES style to the Game Boy style, though the latter is more apropos. However, we generally dislike the sound effects, and the sound balance is often borked. Worse still, this game is friggin' loud! We were immediately forced to reduce the volume significantly for our playthrough because it was completely overwhelming the audio channels in our software. Want a taste of how loud this game really is though? Here you go. And warning, this is pretty bad. Headphone listeners, beware. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's no bueno. And guess what? No options exist to change the sound balance of the music or the effects. Ouch. Like, literal ouch. With its simple menus, no one is getting lost in this game, and a simple set of achievements adds just a little more replay if this kind of punishment is your thing. I'd rather be whipped with a cat of 9 tails. Spicy. So, how does Pigship and the Giant Wolf stack up? Let's take a look. Controlling the player's Pigship is a chore, and thanks to the inertia implemented into the player's movement, tiny dodges and fine accuracy are thrown completely out the window. This game is difficult, but for all the wrong reasons. Partly because of the control, but mostly because you have to restart whatever stage you're on if you bite it. And bite it you will. There are only 6 stages in this game, but due to the insane amount of tedium with constant stage restarts thanks to the game's bullshit traps, yeah, good luck slogging through to the end without giving up. Doubly so in Bones mode. Visually, Pigship mostly succeeds, save for the enemy bullets that match the player's bomber attack identically. Game Boy style music? Decent. NES style? Even better. Effects? Meh. Sound balance? Fuck off with that. We can kinda see what Pixel Bone Studio is going for here with its various design choices, but we're not really sure it works. Pigship and the Giant Wolf is a cheap game at about $8 US, but maybe not an especially good buy. Look, I'm gonna have to level with you all. Plain and simple, this game is just not very good, at least as far as we're concerned. And we know there will probably be some of you out there that will chime in to tell us that we don't get it or whatever, but hey, if you ended up liking it, power to ya. But as far as we're concerned, outside of its admittedly great presentation, and due to the numerous crashes we encountered, Pigship and the Giant Wolf is a solid pass. You can get this game for about $8 on the eShop and PSN Store for PS5 only. Alright, enough detours. It's time to get that Rayforce feature underway. Then it's on to the Pocky and Rocky Complete review coming soon to the channel. We'll see you all in the next one.